What's going on, y'all? So I finally finished painting most of the parts. I got the axles painted, I got the spindles painted, I've got my control arms painted. Um, I'm gonna start rebuilding the axle tomorrow. That'll probably be its whole own episode. Um, Doing bearing seals. I got the true track to go in it, so that'll be its own episode. What I'm about to start working on is I'm about to start working on the front end. Um, I'll start getting the control arms on there, the spindles, the springs, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. So while watching this, you'll see that I left a lot of bolts and some miscellaneous stuff on the frame when I took it to get powder coated. I was kind of in a hurry at first, and I was in a rush, and I didn't really think it all the way through. But so you'll see in the next few clips that I had to go through and really take an X-Acto knife and cut some stuff out and really take my time not to tear up the powder coat. I was having some issues with my camera and microphone for the first part of the video, so bear with me, there's no audio for the first 5 minutes. You can see I've destroyed the powder coat on most of the bolts as I've taken them out. I'll take those home and clean them up and paint them, and then you can see on the frame here that where the washers were, there's some bare rust spots. I'll later on clean those up and paint them with some enamel nail polish. I was really struggling to get these bolts out because with the added powder coat material thickness, they would not slide out without removing the powder coat first. So you'll see on the right side, I was able to impact it off, but I had to completely take all the powder coat off. On the left side, it didn't want to come out with an impact, so I had to scrape it all off with a knife. When I was originally stripping the frame, the shock had broken on me and just spun out. So this is me finally getting to it and cutting it off. So I brought the bolts home to clean them up, and I tried a few different methods. The first thing I did was try sandblasting them, but that was extremely tedious, though it did clean the bolt pretty great. The next thing I tried was shucking the bolts off with a knife and then running it down through a nut to clean up the threads. This didn't work as well as intended though, and was also pretty tedious. The best solution I found was to go to Home Depot and buy a wire wheel and clean the bolts that way. To get to the motor mounts on these trucks, you have to remove the lower control arms. So instead of doubling my work later, I just went ahead and replaced the motor mounts now before I did the control arms.
I put some duct tape on the back side to stop spray paint from spraying through.
Alright, since this is a 3/8 bolt, I googled the torque spec for a bolt this size, and it's about 30 to 40 foot-pounds. So I'm going to use my torque wrench right here and run these down to 40 foot-pounds. Loaded control arm. It's got a vehicle, some arm room while we're putting the...
Get the right wrench, Eric. It's starting to spin.
Before installing my control arms, I'm going to coat all my contact surfaces and bushings with a silicone lubricant. Here I'm using Sil-Glide brake lubricant. That's just what AutoZone had. It's important to use something silicone based and not petroleum based, because petroleum based greases will degrade rubber. Normally you can just use the weight of the truck and the floor jack to press the control arm into the housing, but here I'm running into difficulties where I'm actually just lifting the whole frame. So what I was able to do here is I was able to put a ratchet strap around the control arm and the frame, so they were pulling screws, and then I was able to hammer the other side up high enough so that I could get a screwdriver in. Really, your goal here is to just get them pressed, one side pressed down enough so that way you can get a screwdriver in it, and then you just have to wiggle it back and forth and get some punches in there until eventually the holes line up. This part is definitely more of a brute force thing because it's a press fit. So I was a little confused about upper control arm orientation, but the correct way to do it is the control arms are angled, so you want them angled slightly to the back, and you want them angled downwards. You can see in this picture here.
Alright, well, I've been messing around with the control arm and the ball joints here, trying to figure out how to orientate this. And then I've got the front brake line hose here. They're different for each size. I'm just going to leave that off for now because I can always put it on later. And I can always adjust the upper ball joint later. Once I get the spring and everything in, I can take the upper control arm back out and figure this out later. So, kind of having a small clearance issue, but I went and looked at I went and made sure I had the right part numbers. I went and looked, I still have the old ball joints, so I went and looked at them and they look right. So I'm just going to install this as is, and then if I have to do something with it later, I can. But, looking pretty good here. See if this is 8mm. I'm going with 30 foot-pounds now. Now that these are torqued down, you can see that that gap that I was worried about earlier is gone. I'm a lot more confident in them now.
Bolt orientation here is pretty important. Your upper control arm bolts are actually used as part of your alignment. It's how they set your camber. So both your bolt heads should be pointing inwards here.
Alright, so what I've got here is Lucas Extra Heavy Duty Grease. I googled what was the best ball joint grease. I got a response from Moog.com. They said basically look for the label on the grease and see what it's certified for. Basically, if you look right here, it says NLGI and GCLB. That is what the grease is rated for. So you'll see right here, it'll say NLGI, GCLB. Moog.com says that any grease with that grade is appropriate for ball joints, means it's heavy duty enough. So this is just what I found in AutoZone. You can see that there's kind of some water coming out of it. There's some assembly lube in here, but there's some water in here, so I'm just going to keep pushing lube through until it's coming out without water. Alright, so I know which spindle is which, because the brakes are always going to go towards the back. And then if you look on the back side, there's a fat side and there's a big hole and a small hole. You want the big hole on the bottom. You also know which side's front and back, because this is where your tie rod's going to go in this other hole. So you want that piece towards the front. Now I'm going for round 2 with the spring compressor. You can see that I've already got the spring compressed, probably a couple inches shorter than the other one already. I'm going to slap it with the impact again and try and get it a little bit shorter.
You may not be able to tell from the video, but putting this coil spring in took me about 2 days, and it really sucked. I probably pulled the spring in and out of this control arm like 100 times. But once I did get it down, I did the other side in about 20 minutes. Hide. What you're trying to do is seat the edge of the spring into that notch right there. That's what stops the spring from moving. If you've seen previous videos of mine, you've noticed that we sandblasted these spindles. As such, the actual spindle part itself is covered in sand, so I wanted to make sure I cleaned it thoroughly before I ran it. is a final look on the truck, as far as I have it now. To If you've made it this far into the video, it really means a lot. Consider dropping some feedback down into the comment section. I'll have a ton more videos out on this. I plan on going really in depth with all of them. So just stay tuned, follow along, and feel free to drop any tips in the comments for me.